the fact that Israel has bombed, did 500 raids over the last week alone in Syria, with the pretense that it's trying to preempt any acts from this group. It doesn't really help the situation.
Let's turn to Syria, where mass demonstrations are expected to celebrate the downfall of Bashar al-Assad almost a week after Islamist rebels ended 50 years of his authoritarian rule and that of his family. Although the leader of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham has reassured foreign countries that they have nothing to fear from the new Syrian leadership, the country's future is somewhat uncertain. Following the outpouring of joy that accompanied President Assad's being overthrown, it's unclear how Syria will forge a new path and what kind of relations it will now seek with the rest of the world. Let's speak to Hafed Al-Ghwell, Senior Fellow at the School of Advanced International Studies Foreign Policy Institute at the Hopkins University, also a non-resident Senior Fellow at the Centre of Conflict and Humanitarian Studies. Hafed, good morning. Welcome to the programme.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Callum. I appreciate it.
It's really good to speak to you. The uncertainty reigns. That is the sort of underlying fundamental principle in all of this. I'm quite struck this morning by talk of Turkey sending a high-level emissary to Syria to begin conversation. Russia reporting it secured a deal to maintain its bases in Syria as well. And the US Secretary of State's in the region. Everyone is trying to work out what comes next, Hafed, and no one is quite sure.
Well, that's true. I mean, it's always the case in any transition like this, especially a transition that took almost 14 years to happen. The trick is to learn from the past mistakes that the international community has committed in places like Iraq and Libya, where transition started off with a lot of hope and good intentions, and then it descended into chaos and civil war. So everybody is going to get into this. The trick is for the Syrians themselves to learn what to accept from the international community and what to not accept. So at the end of the day, each of these countries has its own interest. That does not necessarily mean a peaceful future for Syria. Some countries have a stake in the failure of this transition as well.
To what extent can HTS be limited or restrained? Do they actually have the ability to, frankly, do what they want at this point?
It's a tricky situation because they are made up of different factions, and they have united over the objective of bringing down Bashar al-Assad. The problem with these kind of temporary, if you will, alliances is that they can fall apart quite quickly, and these factions turn on each other. I think they have a lot of experience over the last 14 years themselves. And also, I think they can benefit from seeing what happened. Probably the closest example to them is Libya, which seems to have completely collapsed very quickly after the fall of Gaddafi, after everybody sort of agreed to bring him down, including the international community. Nobody then stepped in to maintain law and order and a peaceful transition. So, it's still too early to decide what will happen in Syria. But, let me tell you, the fact that Israel has bombed, did 500 raids over the last week alone in Syria with the pretense that it's trying to preempt any acts from this group. It doesn't really help the situation. The Syrians need time to focus internally on their own wounds and how to move forward.
Yeah, I think there was a suggestion from America that they kind of backed that action by Israel, and that it seemed sort of legitimate given the uncertainty, given the concern that is in the region right now.
I don't think that's the case. I mean, the United States seems to simply accept what Israel does and supports it, irrespective of its potential dangers. The international community has accepted crossing of all red lines over the last year and a half by Israel across the board in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Lebanon, and now in Syria. somebody needs to step in and impose international order, not because of Israel, but this is a precedent. If you allow countries to do this willy-nilly without any consequences, who's going to stop somebody like China from doing the same thing? For example, in Taiwan, who's going to stop Russia from doing the same? So the issue is much bigger. I think the issue is, are we going to live in an international order or international system that is governed by law and humanitarian and human rights and peaceful standards, or are we going to just let everybody does whatever they want just because the United States is willing to accept it?
Yeah, I see what you mean. I was looking for the direct quote. So this is from Jake Sullivan, U.S. National Security Advisor, saying Israel's decision to send troops into the buffer zone was logical and consistent with its right to self-defense, but the U.S. has every expectation that military presence would not be permanent. So I just wanted to get that in there as well. So
it's the period that's the problem.
Yes,
it's the circumstances that are the dangerous part, right? It's not really necessarily what the action is, but is this time of fluidity in Syria is the right time to sort of ignite a cross-border reaction? I mean, look, if you come into any country, doesn't matter what it is, you cannot expect its people to just accept it and say, oh, you have a right to just stop us from potentially acting against you in the future. The U.S. has unfortunately contributed enormously to the dismantling of international order, and I think all of us are going to pay a price for it in the future.
Can I get your take, Hafed? We had, about half an hour ago on this programme, we had, he's now the Energy Secretary in the UK, Ed Miliband, on this programme. But in 2013, he was the leader of the Labour Party, the opposition party, and he led the vote against the UK bombing Assad in 2013 after it was found that he'd used chemical weapons on his own people, including children. And the immediate knock-on effect of that was that it shook President Obama's confidence in taking action, or at least it gave him a way out of taking action. And Mr. Miliband told this programme half an hour ago that he had no regrets about that decision. Do you think he should regret that decision? Was that a mistake by the UK and the US in 2013 not to bomb Assad?
I think so. I mean, even in the United States, Obama, that was a dark spot on Obama's history. The issue is not, for me at least, not about bombing or not bombing. The issue is that there was a red line that was promised. Obama and the UK and others have all said that they will interfere if there is the use of chemical weapons, and then they didn't. That shot their credibility across the world and the region, and everybody sort of figured out, that the West just speaks but never delivers, which is one more nail in this credibility crisis that we are all facing. They paid a price for it. I think the Assad regime had extended its lease on life because of that. And it actually reinforced the fact that you can just easily say, the hell with it, to international law and order, and commit all kinds of atrocities without anybody willing to take action. The same thing we are seeing now. I mean, you're talking about 50,000 people who've died over the last year and a half. I just was watching BBC, in which the estimate is 70% of those who died as a consequence of Israeli bombings across the whole region are women and children. Now, the question, the moral question, the political question is it okay for any country in order to say it's defending itself to wipe out that many people, especially innocent people of children and women? Is that acceptable morally? I understand that Israel needed to react. I understand that there is a need for that. But, it's like if somebody from, one neighborhood in London decides to capture hostages in the West End, and kill few people, then you end up with the UK government wiping out the whole neighborhood and under the excuse that we are defending ourselves.
Yeah. No,
There are a lot of gray areas here that need to be seriously examined, not necessarily
sure.
because of this case, but because do we want this case to be repeated in other parts of the world?
Yeah. Hafed, thank you very much. Thank you for your
Thank you,
thoughts this
Colin.
morning.
Appreciate it.
Likewise, thank you for your time. That is Hafed Al-Ghwell from the John Hopkins University.